Earlier this month, a massive study on the COVID vaccines was published in a well-respected medical journal, only to be censored 24 hours later. Now, the study in question is this one right here. Its title is A Systematic Review of Autopsy Findings in Deaths After COVID-19 Vaccination. And this particular study was essentially a systematic review of many different autopsies of people who died following vaccination, with the conclusion of the study being that the COVID vaccine either caused or significantly contributed to the deaths of 74% of these individuals. Now, on July 5th, this study was published on the Lancet Medical Journal's preprint server. This is a server where researchers can place their studies in order for them to get peer-reviewed. And according to Dr. Peter McCullough, who was the lead researcher, well, despite the fact that the study was experiencing, quote-unquote, hundreds of reviews per minute, the Lancet Medical Journal decided to pull it down. Now, before we dive into the rationale, or lack thereof, for pulling this study offline, let me take a super quick moment to go through how this study was conducted, as well as what it actually found. Now, to start with, this particular study was conducted by 9 different researchers, including Dr. Peter McCullough, who's published over 1,000 publications and has around 660 citations to his name. You have Dr. Harvey Risch, who is a professor of epidemiology at Yale. You had Dr. Roger Hodkinson, who is the former chairman of the examination committee in pathology at the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons. And you had Dr. Paul Alexander, who was a former official at the U.S. Department of Health during the pandemic under President Trump. And then besides them, you had 5 other very qualified doctors and researchers with thousands of publications and medical citations between all of them. And the reason that I think this is worth pointing out is just to give you the background. These individuals behind this particular study, they understood what the publication process actually looks like. Then, in terms of the study itself, here is how it was conducted. Quote, researchers searched all published autopsy and necropsy reports related to COVID-19 vaccination through May 18th of 2023, resulting in 678 studies. After implementing inclusion criteria, they chose 44 papers containing 325 autopsy cases and 1 necropsy case. A panel of 3 expert physicians independently reviewed each case to determine whether COVID-19 vaccination was a direct cause or significant factor in each death. So essentially, they took a look at all the autopsy and necropsy reports that were related to the COVID vaccine up until May 18th of this year. Then, after compiling all these reports, they wound up with 678 studies. These researchers then used something called the PRISMA method, which stands for the Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. It's a long title, but basically it's a 27-point checklist that researchers typically go through in order to make their analysis as transparent and complete as possible. Now, on your screen, you can see a small part of the process. It involves things like removing duplicate records, removing irrelevant records, and removing records that after initial review wind up not being eligible because maybe the proper tests weren't done during autopsy, and so on and so forth. It's a very long 27-point list. That after applying this PRISMA criteria to the 678 studies, the researchers were left with 44 papers, which contained a total of 325 autopsy cases and 1 necropsy case. And for your reference, in this context, a necropsy case is just an autopsy for animals rather than humans. And so then, once these researchers narrowed down their search to just these 325 COVID vaccine-related autopsies, they dug into each one of them and reviewed each individual case in order to determine whether the vaccine was either a direct cause or a significant factor in each one of these individual deaths. And, well, here was their conclusion. Quote, the mean time from vaccination to death was 14.3 days. Most deaths occurred within a week from last vaccine administration. A total of 240 deaths, which is 73.9%, were independently adjudicated as directly due to or significantly contributed to by COVID-19 vaccination. Meaning that these researchers, after digging into it, determined that approximately 74% of the deaths in these studies were either a direct result of the vaccine or the vaccine played a significant factor in the actual death. Furthermore, in terms of the mechanism, well, here's what the researchers wrote. Quote, the most implicated organ system in COVID-19 vaccine-associated death was the cardiovascular system, with 53%, followed by the hematological system at 17%, the respiratory system at 8%, and multiple organ systems at 7%. 3 or more organ systems were affected in 21 cases. Okay, so that is what they found. Out of the 325 autopsies that they independently looked at, 240 of them were determined to be directly related to the vaccine.